Oppenheimer is the latest film from director Christopher Nolan. It chronicles the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, played brilliantly by Cillian Murphy, one of the most brilliant scientific minds of his time. Does this film do him justice? Is it a explosive success, or is it destined to bomb? What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MontyVerse. We just finished our Barbenheimer weekend by checking out Oppenheimer, and boy, do we want to talk about it. Nikki, your first thoughts on Oppenheimer?
I thought it was a fantastic film overall, and a great second part of the Barbenheimer weekend we had. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's a great outing from Christopher Nolan, and you could feel kind of the epicness of the tale he's trying to tell in the way he directs it, the way that it's written, and especially from the performances, especially like you said, Cillian Murphy, who is in so much of this movie and has to carry a lot of the narrative weight of it, and does so fantastically.
Not only is Nolan able to take something as intense as the creation of nuclear weapons, which changed the course of history and is still changing the course of history even to this day, but he's able to tell a compelling story about the struggles of the man who essentially created this change in the world.
Yeah, and honestly, one of the things I liked the most about it was the approach of not just telling the historical events, but kind of exploring the moral quandaries of the nuclear warfare involved in it.
Absolutely. This movie has Nolan's DNA all over it. It feels like a Nolan movie from beginning to end, and having recently watched a lot of Nolan's filmography over again, because I'm a huge fan of Nolan, I'm a huge fan of Nolan's films, this has so many of his directing tricks in the movie. There are a couple of things immediately that jumped out of mind that reminded me of Memento, where we have a non-linear story being told, because this movie jumps between three timelines, three separate periods of time in Oppenheimer's life. And also, Nolan expertly uses the contrasting black and white scenes and color scenes that he also did in Memento, which I really appreciate. Using black and white to really show us things that are factual, that we know happened for a fact, and using color to really show us things from Oppenheimer's perspective, which I thought was a brilliant use of the color changing dynamic in the film.
Absolutely, and in general, it's a gorgeously shot film. From a technical perspective, I don't think I have any critiques. Whether it was in color or black and white, everything that was shot was absolutely gorgeous to look at. It didn't feel distracting or gimmicky in any way, and I mean, not enough can be said about the effects when they have both the test bombs go off. And from that perspective, I think, like you said, he played with familiar tropes, but in a different enough way, and in a way that, like you told me earlier, more refined, I would even say.
Yeah. One thing that he experiments with in this movie are intense close-ups. And with the amount of talent he's accrued in this movie, you can see why, because he's able to get such stellar performances from these actors that he just slams the camera right down their face, and you can just see a story unfolding just off of their expressions. And it takes someone who is as masterful as Nolan to just take an IMAX camera and daringly just shove it in an actor's face and tell them to go. Right. And he's able to get these great performances from them, and I give him all the props in the world.
No, absolutely. And I mean, speaking of the performances, we already brought up Cillian Murphy, who
absolutely disappears in the role of John Robert Oppenheimer. I was fascinated and enthralled with this man's performance in this film. He is captivating. I couldn't take my eyes off of him.
No, absolutely. And outside of Nolan's films, I don't think there's that much that I've seen with him, unless I'm just completely blanking. And having not seen him for a while, he was just fantastic. Like I said, he carries so much of this movie because he's in so much of it. And you really get the feeling that you're watching this man who is so brilliant, but so conflicted, and you don't know if you sympathize or hate him at the same time. Brilliant,
conflicted, flawed, human, so many dimensions to this character. A man who a lot of people have hated for a large period of times.
And understandably, I would say.
Yeah, Oppenheimer's a very divisive person, and I think Cillian Murphy creates a character who's very complex and deserving of that. You know, should we like this guy? Should we feel empathy? Should we have compassion for him?
Right, absolutely. And I certainly don't know the in-depth history of Oppenheimer, but for the purposes of the narrative of this film, I think Nolan and and Nolan alone.
Nolan and Nolan.
Yeah, because he wrote it and
Yes, he
directed
wrote
it, so he's responsible for the way this narrative plays out. I really appreciate how he played out that internal and external conflict that Oppenheimer deals with.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, there are some supporting performances in this film that are on par with Cillian Murphy's brilliance. Obviously, the standout of the film, I would say, is Downey Jr., is RDJ.
Oh, yes.
His performance in here will not go unspoken. I think this is one of the best performances of RDJ's career. I don't think it's Tony Stark, because I have to shill for Marvel. But he also is able to transcend his larger than life persona as an actor and disappear into this role.
Holy hell. I mean, for a man who's now going to be eternally synonymous with Tony Stark.
Yes.
And by the way, makeup on him looks fantastic.
Yes.
But just his performance alone, I did not ever feel like I was watching Iron Man.
Yeah, he gives such a grounded and human performance. It's so, I don't want to use all the adjectives I want to use, because I don't want to just give more detail about the movie than I should, because this is a non-spoiler review. But I will say that there's so many layers to his character, and I love watching RDJ slowly peel back the different layers and show you things that he wants. Like, it's watching RDJ as the character reveal things to you when he feels like revealing things to you, and it's a brilliant dance that he plays with us throughout the runtime of the film. And I was all in. I was dancing right there with him.
Absolutely. I think I'm a little bit higher on him, but a huge standout to me is absolutely Matt Damon.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
He spends a lot of his scenes with Cillian Murphy and very much is a foil to Oppenheimer's character. I consider him kind of, I don't know how to overstate it. He feels a bit electrifying when he comes on screen, because he has a bit of a bigger, more outward energy. And it's definitely different from other things that I feel like I've seen him in, where he's a bit more bombastic. But I thought he was a blast.
His character commands the screen when he's on screen, and that's intentional. His character is in a position of command. So when he's on screen, he definitely commands and demands your attention. And I think he does really well. But me personally, I was way more enamored with the performance of Emily Blunt. Who, if you talk about a versatile performance.
Absolutely.
The gamut of emotions she's able to run throughout the runtime of this movie. I don't want to say impressed me, because I already know Emily Blunt is spectacular. She is phenomenal in everything she's in. So I was not shocked, but I was very satisfied with her performance, and I think she is also a huge standout in this film. That she doesn't, in a 3-hour film, this film is packed with so many different actors and characters. She doesn't have as much screen time as Downey or as Cillian Murphy, but in the scenes that she does have, she 100% draws your eyes to her.
Absolutely. And I know one of the common criticisms that we've seen for the film in general are the portrayal of the female characters. And I don't entirely disagree in terms of they receive less development than some of the other characters. I don't entirely agree with Emily Blunt, though, because her character is easily one of the most fascinating in the film. The biggest criticism I could say is, with how fascinating this woman sounds like she was in real life, I do wish we got more, but that doesn't take away at all from what they have done with her and how electrifying Emily Blunt plays her. And there's especially one scene in particular where she just goes all out, and it's not, I wouldn't even call it necessarily an explosive scene, but the way she just commands the room in the scene she's in, you'll know what I mean when you see this movie.
You know who I do want to talk about that's not a lot of people are talking about, and I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's being given in this movie, is Josh Hartnett. Because he shows up and he comes on the screen, and you won't realize it's Josh Hartnett at first, most likely.
I did not.
They do such a great job at dressing him up in character that he just comes in with this charm and swagger, almost like he gives off an elder gentleman vibe, like almost like in a Harrison Ford in like Indiana Jones, like Han Solo, very charming, rugged, almost like a Kevin Costner. He has a Costner vibe, a Richard Gere vibe, and I think he does a really good job of staking his footing in the movie.
Yes.
And really showing that he can go toe-to-toe with these people in a Christopher Nolan film and deliver a performance that's equally as good to anyone here.
Absolutely. I think probably why he gets lost in the shuffle a bit is his portrayal, and the way he plays his character is a bit more low key. It's not bombastic or loud at all. But I think that's also a mark of someone who's acting very well, is when they do it in a way that is subtle, that, oh, I didn't even realize it was you. I didn't realize what you were doing immediately. But it's funny because that's not who I thought you were about to say.
Who did you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to say someone else who I also think probably deserves some more credit, especially considering he goes toe-to-toe with these bigger names, and that's Alden Ehrenreich.
Oh, he's fantastic as well. But I consider him one of the leads of the movie.
Fair enough.
I feel like he's in a lot of the movie. In the grand scheme of things, he's probably not, but that shows how great he is in this part.
Yeah.
Because he seems super important to the plot.
Well, yeah, and in most of his scenes, he's acting off of RDJ, and the fact that he can even go toe-to-toe with him.
He's in there, in the ring, going the distance. He's Rocky Balboa, going the distance with RDJ. And I always liked Alden Ehrenreich. I think he has this charm and charisma to him as an actor. And it's very evident if you've seen Solo that this guy's got a lot of swagger
and
to
charisma.
him.
And just, again, he's very commanding.
And the fact that, because him and RDJ scenes are pretty much one-on-one. There's another actor in the room, but it's essentially a one-on-one conversation they have for the majority of the film.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's able to just keep up, and not only keep up, but be on the same level as RDJ in those scenes is very impressive, and I think he's very great.
It's actually funny, because now that you say that out loud, if this movie were actually a play, I would almost feel like their scenes together would make a great example of a scene partner example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure someone will use that, especially some of the later scenes in the movie. But we got to move on from cast, because we could literally talk about this cast for days. It's so long. There's a lot of surprise appearances in the movie, so be on the lookout for that. But this is one of the most brilliantly assembled cast in movies in probably the past decade.
Right, and with the sheer number of people, the fact that they didn't really have any missteps with the casting is an achievement in itself.
Absolutely. I have to give a special shout out to Ludwig Göransson, who, just as I've been a fan of him since his early days with Childish Gambino and his work on producing those albums and creating the music to those albums, and to see him rise to this level, to see him do the Black Panther stuff, and to see him work with Nolan in Tenet and in Oppenheimer.
Absolutely.
It's just, the score is beautiful. It's so beautiful and stunning and gorgeous, and it sets the scene of every scene in this film so well. The music is, of course, it's a Nolan film. There's always epic music, but I think Göransson does such a great job at finding the right music to play. I get it. We've had great composers work with Nolan before.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer especially.
Hans Zimmer is his muse a lot of the time.
Who I think was only not doing this film because he was too busy.
Yeah, but I think Göransson. I think the score in Tenet and the score in this, I think I may like his collaborations with Göransson more than I do Zimmer. And I love some of the Zimmer scores. But again, it just shows that when you work with Nolan, everyone's on their A game, and Göransson, just like everyone else, is on their A game.
No, absolutely.
I mean, besides that, costume design, epic sound design. That's something I want to talk about.
Yes, and we saw this in IMAX, so it really came through.
It was gorgeous. All of these sounds were impactful. From the littlest sounds to footsteps to water dripping to a nuclear explosion.
Yes.
Everything had weight and depth and impact. It was gorgeous. I kept thinking that throughout the film, this sound design is gorgeous. I love hearing the different, sound effects and the timing of the sound effects. It was just so well done. And again, it just, every single department was on their A game. Costumes, that suit that Cillian Murphy wears throughout the entire film.
With the hat.
He rocks it. That's a sick fit.
And that's also a great scene in itself when at one point someone actually recommends hey, go back to your normal attire. Don't try to be like one of these military bigwigs.
You're Oppenheimer, and then he has a superhero suit up scene. No, I'm joking.
While this film is fantastic, though, I do think there's some things that are worth noting. And honestly, in the grand scheme of things, I think the flaws are heavily outweighed by the strengths. Firstly, kind of going back to the cast a bit, is Florence Pugh's character, who, to be clear, I think her performance is fantastic, as she always is. I think it's more so the writing of her character, who is a lover of Oppenheimer's. I think she's incredibly underdeveloped and underutilized.
It's a very important character in the real Oppenheimer's life, so they had to include this character in the film for the story they were trying to tell. I mean, I guess they didn't have to, but I understand why they chose to do it. And it's a problematic character no matter how you write it, based off of, because this is real world events, and it was a very troubling time for a lot of women. The time that the periods of times this film takes place. So unfortunately, it could have been handled better.
I think the thing is, she's someone who I believe probably had a lot of depth in real life, and there were hints of that. We just didn't explore it very thoroughly.
Couldn't explore it because we had to spend time with
other things.
It was Oppenheimer, the movie. So I would agree with you on that. I would also say that some people are saying they don't feel the runtime. For me, I felt the runtime towards the end of the movie.
Absolutely.
It's 3 hours. It's a 3-hour epic, and there's no denying that it is an epic.
Yeah.
But the last hour of the movie feels like a completely different movie. It shifts tones.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind it, but it did feel a little long towards the end.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there are any scenes in particular I actively disliked or can immediately tell you cut the scene out, this should have been shorter. But I do feel like there were some things that probably dragged a teensy bit longer than it absolutely needed to. And like you said, especially with the last hour, when the last hour has a very clear function, but I think it could have probably been a little bit cleaner and more concise. Yeah,
there were scenes that were added in there that were kind of like the scenes out of the MCU teasing things that seemed like they were going to happen in future films. I feel like we could have cut that. We didn't need that.
Or just could have been written in or presented differently.
Yeah, we could have shaved a couple minutes off. But outside, again, it is a 3-hour epic, and despite it being long, the majority of the film is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So the fact that I didn't like a few minutes here and there is I'm totally okay with, because I was totally enamored with the vast majority of this film. Well, Nikki, out of 5 old-timey fedoras, what would you rate Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer?
Oh, man. So the flaws that I did have with it definitely knock it down a teeny bit for me. And I don't know if this is a film compared to other ones I've seen this year that I'll go back to rewatch as fervently, but it is an excellent film. So for that, I will give it 4 out of 5 old-timey fedoras.
Wow, okay. For me, I grew up watching Nolan's films. I mean, Batman, as a comic book fan, Batman Begins is what got me into Nolan. But I went back and I watched Memento, and from there it was pretty much I watched his entire filmography. And this movie to me feels like Nolan's masterpiece. Do I think it's his best film? I don't know. I think it's too. I might have to rewatch it to give my final verdict. For me, there are still a few films I would put ahead of this, but this is still, by all intents and purposes, in my perspective, a masterpiece of filmmaking. And for that, I'm giving Oppenheimer 4.5 old-timey fedoras out of 5. If you like Nolan and you enjoy great filmmaking, go see this movie as fast as you can, and then go see Barbie. Go Barbin. Go do yourself a Barbenheimer, please. If you guys like this video, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest content. If you want to catch more of our movie reviews, make sure to click the link on the page. And until next time, guys, stay versed.